We need to understand the source. And when we understand the source and identify a technique to manage it, much of our anxiety will abate. So let me introduce you to the 3 sources academics tell us underlie our anxiety. The first source is what is called situation-based anxiety. We are nervous for speaking because of the context or situation we are in. Let me give you an example. Some of you, I recognize from outside in the corridor, you were sitting with groups of friends or new friends, and you were talking about some topic of passion that you guys were all interested in. At no point during that interaction were you nervous. However, had I come up to you and said, "Oh, excuse me, that sounds really fascinating. I've got about an hour I'm supposed to present. Would you come talk for 5 minutes in front of the couple hundred people for me?" At that moment, you might become very nervous. Why you're nervous is not the topic. It's where you're doing the presentation. It's where you're doing it. So academics tell us that one source of anxiety is the situation. And they suggest that the reason the situation makes us nervous is because we see it as a performance. We see it as a right way and a wrong way to get our idea across. That's why they call it performance anxiety. Actors, singers, they experience performance anxiety because there is a right way in acting and singing. If you don't hit your mark exactly at the right time, the lights and sound guys, they don't know what to do. The other actors don't know what to do. You have to do it right or it confuses people. The nice thing about speaking is there is no right way, there is no wrong way. There are certainly better and there are certainly worse, but there is no one right way. So what we want to do is to get away from performance anxiety, we need to reframe the situation. Rather than a performance, we see it as a conversation. So this technique is called cognitive reframing. It simply means relabel it, see it differently. So rather than a performance, we see it as a conversation. Most of us in this room are not nervous having conversations. We are nervous performing. So we need to make our speeches conversations. How do you do that? Well, it's a little harder than just saying, "Oh, I'm just about to have a conversation with 200 of these people I don't know." There are a couple things we can do. First, practice conversationally. When you practice your presentation, put yourself in a physical environment like you would when you are having a conversation. Do it around a dinner table, do it around a coffee table. Sit and have a conversation about it. Second, use conversational language. Many speakers feel that when they are speaking, they have to be very formal in their presentation, and they use formal language. One must consider the ramifications of... That's not how we talk in conversation. We say things like, "This is important to you." I recently, just a week ago, coached this guy who said, "The audience will recognize." I looked around. I was the only person in the room. He should say, "You will recognize," or he knew my name. He should have said, "Matt, you will recognize." So use conversational language. The word "you" is the most powerful word in the English language. Say "you." It connects you to your audience. It makes it conversational. We practice conversationally. We use conversational language. And the last trick to becoming conversational is to use questions. These can be rhetorical questions where you don't expect an answer. But by asking questions, I invite dialogue. Conversation is a dialogue. So you can start with questions. Those 3 techniques, practicing conversationally, using conversational language, asking questions, turn your speaking into a conversation versus a performance. So for those of you who think that situation is one of the causes of your anxiety, try that technique out. Hopefully it will help. The second source of anxiety is the audience. Who is it I'm speaking in front of? Audiences vary. They vary in their knowledge of your topic, their power over you, their relationship to others in the room. That can make you very nervous. This is my source of anxiety, who I speak in front of. I often don't get nervous getting up in front of groups, but if you put me up in front of people who do what I do for a living, professors of speech communication, I get nervous. And every year, I go to a conference where I get up in front of my peers and I have to give a speech, and I have to remind myself of all these techniques we've talked about. So it's the audience that can make us nervous. And to address the audience fear, The technique that works best and has been studied longer than any other anxiety management technique for speaking is called visualization. Research over 35 years has gone into this technique. How many of you have ever played a sport where a coach told you to visualize that sport, getting the ball into the basket or the ball hitting? So how many of you have ever done that? Several of you have raised your hand. Visualization is where you see it in your mind, you don't actually do it. Sports psychologists tell us the second best way to improve in a sport is to visualize. The first best way is actually to practice. But visualization can help. So here's how it works. Before you give your presentation, go into the room if you have access to it. Check out the room. See the environment. I came in here long before any of you did to see the room. Get an experience of what it's like. Think about who's going to be in the room. Often when you present, you know the audience you're going to get. You know who they are. I don't know many of you, but I know the type of people you are. So I could visualize. I've been around enough Toastmasters groups to know. You're friendly, you're eager. So I was able to visualize it. So what I do, a few days before my presentation, is I think about the room and the people in the room, and I see them responding positively to my presentation. What this does is it desensitizes us so that when I get up here, it's not new. I've seen it before in my mind's eye. Now, I'm often asked a couple questions. The first question I'm asked is, what happens if you can't see the room or you don't know what who's going to be in the room? And there are situations where that might be true, but with the internet and with a little sleuthing, you can do a lot of reconnaissance. You can find out the layout of the room. You can find out what people look like. Go to Facebook, go to LinkedIn. You can see who your audience is. You can do a lot to learn who they are. And I challenge you to do that. So visualization works by simply seeing the situation and seeing it go positively. Notice I did not say that we actually spend time visualizing our presentation, seeing the words we say. That gets you in trouble because that leads to performance anxiety. We talked about that a moment ago. What we visualize is simply a positive response to our presentation. And decades worth of research shows that visualization helps many people feel more comfortable and less anxious. That leads us to our third source of anxiety. We talked about situation, we talked about audience. The third source is our goal, what it is we're trying to achieve. Often when we speak, we have a purpose, and that purpose is to communicate an idea, to motivate an audience, to not get fired, to get a good grade. Notice those goals, by definition, are all future-focused. They're all in the future. And it is that future concern that makes us nervous. So here's what we do. We become present-oriented. If you become present-oriented, you're not concerned about that future consequence. Has anybody ever heard of flow experience or rapt attention? These are psychological terms for that being in the moment. And there are lots of ways to get yourself in the moment. If you watch athletes, they listen to music. That music brings them into the moment. I know a professional speaker, he's paid $10,000 a speech. Before he gets up, he's nervous when he gets up in front of people. Before he gets on stage, behind the stage, he does 100 push-ups. You can't do that physical exertion and not be in the present moment. Yes, he's out of breath, and yes, he's sweaty when he takes the stage, but that's part of his shtick, right? I know another professional speaker. She plays a video game, a handheld video game. It's a very engrossing, engaging video game. She sets her watch alarm. She gets up, plays the video game. When the alarm goes off, she walks on stage. Again, brings her in the moment. You can do simple things. Do Sudoku. Count backwards from 100 by some tough number like 13. That brings you in the moment. My favorite, and I'm going to ask you to help me do this, is to say a tongue twister. You can't say a tongue twister right and be worried about something else. I hope you'll indulge me. I'd like you to repeat my favorite tongue twister. I'll say it and you repeat it after me. And the reason I like this one so much is if you say it wrong, you say a naughty word, so I'll be listening. Okay? Follow me. I slit a sheet. A sheet I slit. And on that slitted sheet I sit. Nobody said the naughty word. Good for you. Notice. I want you to notice a couple things. First, while you were saying that silly tongue twister, you weren't worried about the fact that you were saying silly words in front of a bunch of strangers. right? You were in the moment, you were focused. That's that present orientation. The other advantage of doing a tongue twister is it causes you to verbalize. Nervous speakers often don't practice out loud. They practice in their head. And we all know what we think doesn't always translate to what we say. So it warms up your voice and it gets you verbalizing. So the way we combat goal-based anxiety is we become present-oriented. So what we've talked about are the three sources of anxiety. The situation, and we said that's about reframing to a conversation. We talked about audience-based anxiety, and we said that's about visualization. And then we talked about goal-based anxiety, and that's about becoming present-oriented. Each of you can reflect on your own anxiety and identify what source it comes from. It might be multiple sources, but often it is predominated by one. And you can try one of those techniques. The technique might not work for you, but there are others. Everybody has their own feeling when it comes to different techniques, and you have to find the one or two that work for you.